Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm Simon of Savage Reads, and today I am back with a slightly different video, which is why I'm dressed a little bit more smartly than normal. It is also for continuity purposes slightly, although I've not got a shirt on and I've got the wrong glasses on, but never mind. The lovely folk at the BBC have very kindly given me the footage for when I did the Man Booker live show on BBC News and BBC World last week. Lots of you have said you would have really liked to see it and you couldn't for various different reasons, so I did a little begging email and very kindly the BBC News have given me this footage. So I'm not going to waffle on much more. I'm going to hand over. It is a bit longer video than normal because it was a half-hour show, and it is the whole show because I haven't dared to watch it back yet. I just can't quite yet. So you might want to grab a cuppa, press pause and then come back, or press pause, grab a cuppa and come back. And yeah, I hope you enjoy it. Let me know your thoughts below. Thanks again to the BBC for letting me do this, and also petition them to get more book stuff on the telly, I say. But yeah, it was a really wonderful evening with Natalie Haynes and Rebecca Jones, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hello and welcome to the splendid surroundings of Guildhall, here in the heart of the City of London, where in the next half an hour we will find out who has won one of the world's most important and most famous literary prizes, the Man Booker, awarded to the best novel of the year. Previous winners include Sir Salman Rushdie and Dame Hilary Mantel, and here in the room this evening other past winners, including the Nobel laureate Sir Kazuo Ishiguro, as well as Ben Okri, Howard Jacobson and A.S. Byatt. And tonight, one new name will be added to that illustrious roll call. It's been quite a journey to get to this point. The judges read 171 books. They whittled them down to a long list of 13, a short list of 6, and tonight there will just be one book left, one winner. This is a real highlight of the literary calendar. There are 500 people here in the room. They've been enjoying a champagne reception followed by a 3-course dinner, and among them the 6 writers shortlisted for the prize this year. Frankly, you do wonder how much of an appetite they've got. It must be nerve-jangling, mustn't it, waiting to hear if you've won, because make no mistake, for the winner tonight, this will be a career-defining moment. It means an increase in sales, it means an increase in profile, and to say nothing of the £50,000 cheque that goes with winning. We have a royal guest here tonight as well. Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Cornwall will be presenting the trophy to the winner in this a very special year for the prize, its 50th anniversary. Well, to help guide us through the proceedings, I'm delighted to say that we're joined by the author and broadcaster Natalie Haynes, and a former judge, of course, of this prize. Natalie, welcome. Hello. And by the blogger and vlogger Simon Savage, the man behind Savage Reads. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Much to discuss. But before we do, let's just remind ourselves who is on this year's shortlist.
This year, the 6 nominees are Everything Under by Daisy Johnson. It's her first novel. Set on the waterways of Oxford, it tells the story of a mother and daughter haunted by memories of the past. The judges have described Milkman by Anna Burns as an experimental book. It explores the troubles in Northern Ireland through the eyes of an 18-year-old girl. Richard Power's ecological epic The Overstory is a love letter to trees and follows 9 strangers trying to save American forests from destruction. The Mars Room by Rachel Kushner takes place in a prison in California and focuses on a woman serving 2 consecutive life sentences for killing her stalker. Essia Dujan's Washington Black is based on a true story. Set in the 19th century, it's about a young slave who escapes from a Caribbean sugar plantation and travels the world. Robin Robertson's book The Long Take is a novel told in verse and photographs, which follows a D-Day veteran in America during the golden age of Hollywood.
So, an intriguing list, 4 women, 2 men, 3 British writers, 2 Americans and 1 Canadian. Let's have a look at it in a little bit more detail. And why don't we start with Daisy Johnson and Everything Under, because let's be honest, she's been the author who's been grabbing all the headlines this year, not only because Everything Under is her first novel, but at the age of 27 she is the youngest writer ever to be shortlisted for this book. And this is a modern reworking of the Oedipus story, isn't it? And Simon, if I might start with you, how much of an achievement do you think it is for a first novel?
I think it's an incredible achievement. I think it's got a dreamlike quality and a mythical quality to it, and her having a lexicographer, I've probably said that wrong, but having a lexicographer in it, it's all about words and how she plays with words throughout. I think it's an incredible debut.
The judges thought it was beautifully written, Natalie. I mean, in your view, does it deserve its place on the list?
Yes, I mean, you can't take anything away from her. It's her first novel. So to have a first novel on the shortlist, the judges know that they're taking a bit of a risk, because obviously headlines will be her youth, because people are obsessed with age, but also her comparative inexperience. But she has already written a very successful collection of short stories, Fen. So yes, okay, it's her first novel, but she didn't just, fall out of a tree and start typing. That's not what's happened here. So yeah, I think it's a brave decision always to put a first novelist on the list, especially when they're young, because you know it will generate headlines. And I think they had confidence in it. It's mythic, and it's fairy tale-ish. And it has this incredible sense of location, particularly of time and space shifting as the river shifts where narrator lives. And so, yeah, you can exactly see why they chose it.
Okay, terrific. Well, look, let's move on to Milkman. Now, this is a writer from Northern Ireland, Anna Burns. This is her third novel, and it's the troubles in Northern Ireland seen through the eyes of an 18-year-old girl, in part inspired by Anna Burns' own experiences growing up in Belfast in the 1970s. Natalie, the judges have described this as an experimental novel, and there are pages without paragraphs, for example, aren't there? Did it work for you?
It does work. I think it's really interesting that I know Simon listened to it as an audiobook, and we heard a reading earlier during the ceremony. It is a really beautiful thing to hear aloud. It has a real performed quality to it. And I think there are a lot of writers coming out of Ireland and Northern Ireland who are producing this lovely kind of stream of consciousness, Joycean type fiction. So I'm not sure. I think innovative is exactly the word. That seems to me to sell it rather short in a way. I think actually she is building on a tradition which has been in the making for quite a while, but she's taken it somewhere strange and dystopian. Nobody has names, the place isn't mentioned, although it seems pretty clear that it's Belfast. So it gives it this very curious, untethered quality, which gives it an almost universal appeal, I think.
As Natalie says, Simon, there are no names. People go by the name of somebody McSomebody or maybe boyfriend. I'm interested you listened to it as an audiobook. Was that because you struggled with it on the printed page?
Initially, yeah, and then once I got the narrative in my ear, it was instantly, I was with it and I was going through the quirky narration. But what I think is incredible about this novel is the fact that she's writing about the Troubles in a dystopic way, and you feel like, oh, this could be the future, but actually it's already happened. I think that's incredible.
You liked it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the big hitter, I guess, now. The first American on the list, the bookie's favourite, The Overstory by Richard Powers. This is his 12th novel, and it is a hymn to trees, a love letter to trees. It follows 9 separate people who are trying to save the forests from destruction. Simon, it's a hefty old read, 500 pages, by far the longest book on the shortlist this year. That might put people off. Would that be a mistake, or dare I say it, did it need to be pruned?
I thought it could have been pruned a little bit. However, what I did really enjoy about it is, I mean, it does start off with these 9 almost short stories to begin with before these kind of all stories come together. I was nervous of it because everyone was calling it the giant tree book. So that instantly made me go, I'm not too sure about that. But once you're in it, the love letter to trees, it isn't just about that. It's actually about people, and it's about the best kind of people in some ways and also the worst. But what I think is brilliant with this particularly is that all the other novels have sort of one particular amazing style. This has so many. You can get a paragraph about a tree, and then you can get a page that takes a whole century into account. It's incredible.
Moby Dick for trees.
The Moby Dick of trees. I love this book. I love it so much. It had me at hello. I love trees. I love a big sturdy book, and yeah, I think it's absolutely extraordinary. It is structured yes, you heard me right, structured like a tree. So it begins with these isolated short stories as the roots, and then the characters come together in the trunk. I'm not even telling you anymore. I don't want to spoil it for you. I read it like a thriller. I absolutely adored it.
Okay, I think that's a thumbs up.
Yes, it is.
Let's move on to the second American on the list, The Mars Room, Rachel Kushner. This is partly set in a women's prison, and I like the fact that it took you somewhere that you wouldn't normally go or read about.
Yeah, if Overstory is the Moby Dick of trees, this is the Orange is the New Black of novels, I guess. It's really good, though. My goodness. I mean, so is Orange is the New Black, I should hasten to add. Kushner is such a strong writer. She has got the most incredible caustic wit running through it. But what's extraordinary about it is that she can use language so beautifully to describe situations which are so ugly, so hurtful and so hateful, but that she gives a voice to people, to women particularly, who we would always overlook.
Simon, it's been called bleakly comic. Did it make you laugh or rather put your head in your hands?
It occasionally made me laugh quite a lot, but also there's a fine line, I think, between a book that's designed to shock and make you think and can sometimes go into slightly overly graphic, and I think this just about treads the right line. There are occasions where I thought, oh, is this going too far? But actually, it's interesting that at Liverpool Libraries where I work, this has been the most borrowed out of the entire shortlist.
Yeah. Okay, let's move. That was her third novel, Essie Adujan's third novel, Washington Black. This is an adventure story, but dealing with serious themes, Simon, slavery and racism. What did you make of this one? She's the only Canadian writer on the list.
I think this is incredible, and the more distance I've had from the book, the better I think it is. And I think what she does, without pretension or without pulling at the heartstrings too much, she actually talks about the erasure of black voices through white patrons after they've become free, and it looks at the price of freedom and also how it is after a horrendous part of history.
Natalie,
really.
This has been called the most readable book on the list. Is that damning it with faint praise?
Yeah, I think it is actually, because it is incredibly readable. But it's an adventure story, but her prose is absolutely magnificent. I was on the panel for the Orange Prize, the Women's Prize as it now is, who shortlisted Half-Blood Blues. And
which was her previous novel.
It was, and obviously that was also shortlisted for the Booker. And I genuinely think this is up a gear again, and I thought the last one was good enough to shortlist for major prizes. So yeah, I think her imagery particularly is so beautiful. And again, as with the Kushner, but perhaps more lyrically in this book, her ability to create beauty from the most horrific situations is absolutely second to none.
Well, last but by very no means least, we come to the long take by the Scottish poet Robin Robertson, a very acclaimed and prize-winning poet, and this is a narrative tale about a D-Day veteran with post-traumatic stress disorder. The big question is, Simon, is it a novel? I mean, it's told in verse.
I'm still torn on that one, but I mean, I read it as a novel. I thought this was going to be the one that would scupper me a little bit, and actually I read it very fluidly and I went through it. I think the bits around trauma and the dealing with post-war are really fascinating, and the descriptions of America are amazing. I would have just liked probably a little bit more about the trauma, I think, to give it a bit more meat.
Did it add up to a novel for you, Natalie?
Yeah, it does, I think. I mean, it's a slight novel maybe, just in terms of word count, which I know is something that some commentators get very hung up on, because my year we shortlisted Testament of Mary, and it was 100 pages and people were, it's a short story. It isn't.
33,000 words that was.
I don't make the rules, actually. No, I don't. But I think this does, I mean, it's the most extraordinary combination of things. It's a poem that's sort of also a novel, and it's a film noir, except that it's in literary form. Oh, and by the way, it's set in Los Angeles, but it's about a war veteran. And you're like, wait, what? What's happening? It's so many things, and it could so easily have all fallen apart. But his control is properly mesmerising, because to have held all those disparate elements together and created this long narrative poem, I have absolutely no problem with someone calling it a novel.
It's very interesting. Robin Robertson, I spoke to him earlier, he was actually surprised to be on the shortlist. I mean, I'm not sure he thinks that it's a work of fiction, but
I reckon he'll say it now.
Do. Yes, exactly. I mean, the shortlist this year has been called, they've been described, haven't they, as dark novels for dark times. And there are some pretty heavy themes in here: slavery, prisons, poverty, ecological destruction, and it did lead one critic to say it was reader repellent. What did you make of the overall mix, Simon?
I think it's a really interesting mix. I think actually, yes, they are dark, but there is an element of hope in every single one in some way. I suppose it depends on how you read the text, but I think for me it's a really interesting mix. and it's one that kind of will please. If you go away and read the shortlist, all of it, as we have, you do get a lot out of it. So I think it's a good shortlist.
I've read a lot of these shortlists. I felt personally this year there was a lot to admire, much to admire, not always quite so much to love.
Yeah, that might be true. I think my slight worry is that Washington Black, Mars Room, Overstory and Long Take, all of which I really, really rate, that's that 2/3 of the list is set partly or wholly in North America. Washington Black moves around more than the others, but it seems to me a very North American focused list, and it bothers me a little bit that voices from the Commonwealth, I do see that Canada is part of the Commonwealth, but I mean, again, sorry, but my year we had a Canadian-Japanese novel, an Indian-American novel, as the first Zimbabwean writer, Neviolet Bulawayo, Colm Tóibín, who started an island, lived in America, wrote about Jerusalem, and Ellie Catton, who won, of course, from New Zealand, Bus Jim Crace from Birmingham. Yes. And so it feels to me that we haven't got quite that diversity of experience this time. It's very North America focused. I'm not sure that's necessarily a good
nodding,
thing.
Simon, because of course if Richard Powers or Rachel Kushner won, they would be the third American in a row to win this prize after the rules were changed in 2014 to enable Americans to be eligible.
Yeah, and I think the prize over the last couple of years particularly hasn't been as geographically diverse, which I think is a shame. I do think there's diversity in what the subjects of the books are, and the range of writing as well is very diverse, but I do think there is part of me that's thinking, what about all the countries that you know, Australia, they have some great novels coming from Australia. Where are those in the list? But again, we don't know what was submitted. So
you've both been judges of prizes, you of the Booker, you of the Costa. Can you give us any sense about how you would go about picking a winner?
Am I picking my winner?
I'll come to that in a moment, but I mean, what goes on in the jury room? Horse trading?
I think certainly to get the shortlist, there's some horse trading. I think that's almost always true. I think there's always a little bit of a risk that good books get lost in that. But
formal proceedings are about to begin. Quick prediction: who's going to win?
I want it to be the Overstory,
Chair of the 2018 Man Booker Prize judges.
I can tell you now what even I did not know this very morning, and announce that the 2018 Man Booker Prize for Fiction goes to Anna Burns for Milkman.
So Anna Burns wins the Man Booker Prize for her third novel, Milkman, and she makes history as the first Northern Irish writer to win the prize. She drew on her own experience of Northern Ireland during the Troubles to write Milkman. It's seen through the eyes of an 18-year-old girl who is being pursued by a sinister member of a paramilitary organisation. And the judges praised its surprising and immersive prose. Anna Burns there just receiving her trophy, and she will step to the podium to say a few words, somewhat reluctantly it might seem.
Oh my goodness. I'll just do a lot of thanks. I'd like to thank David Grossman, my agent, for taking on my book. And I'd like to thank my publishers, Faber and Faber, for saying they'd do me proud, and they did. I'd like to acknowledge all the great writers who won the shortlist and long list with me. Thank you. I'd love to say to all my dear friends, thank you for all your support. And I'd like to say to Carol Cornish, who published my first story ever, I know you're out there somewhere, Carol, and thank you. Oh, my goodness. I think I'd better stop. Thank you. Thanks.
So clearly very emotional and surprised Anna Burns there, receiving her trophy and returning to her table, and no doubt congratulations. Simon Savage and Natalie Haynes are still with me. Well, neither of you tipped the winner,
I'm so
but
sorry.
no, it's fine. But a worthy winner. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I love the fact that every year, without exception, the bookies always pick the wrong winner. The only way to make money, I'm told, on betting on the Booker is to always bet against the favourite because that's the absolute guarantee. But yeah, of course, you could see what an emotional journey it's been for her. A third novel, so she's somebody who's really, just pushed through that extra level with this book. She's going to find a whole new generation of readers, a whole new category of readers that she's never going to have managed to get to before. It's such an exciting moment. You'd have to have a heart of stone not to be on her team.
I mean, she's been shortlisted for the Orange Prize for Women's Fiction, as it was then called, back in 2002. That was for her third novel, Milkman, her third novel. So this is a real breakthrough for her, isn't it? How surprised are you, Simon?
I'm slightly surprised, but not massively, because one of the things that I love about book prizes, they always bring authors or books that you've not heard of, and this is a book that actually has kind of gone under the radar mainly, and I think that's one thing that is great about prizes. They do bring these books that you don't expect. So it's a book that I think certainly people will be talking about, and I would recommend the audiobook just to get that lilt. But once you're in, I think it's a really, really interesting novel. As I said, it's the whole dystopic, but actually it's in the past. I think that's fascinating.
It is a challenging book, though, isn't it? It takes you a while to tune into the voice of the 18-year-old girl, because the words do sort of fall over each other. She almost creates her own prose style, doesn't she? Yeah. Do you think that might put readers off a bit?
I mean, maybe, but it didn't put people off reading Girl is a Half-Formed Thing, so... Cry Me a River readers, try harder. I'm sure people will get it. It's a very funny book, and certainly when you hear it rather than read it, the jokes are much clearer, maybe, if you're not used to thinking in that kind of lyrical way. I think it might take a little while, but I think its fans are going to be real devotees, and I think they will convert.
What I think she does do very well in this book is create that kind of gossipy world of a small, slightly incestuous society where everybody knows everybody else's business. Did you like that as well?
I found it very claustrophobic, actually. I think that's the one thing, and it's that whole Big Brother is watching you, but you don't know who Big Brother is, and that's very much actually what we're going through at the moment, I think. And I think that way also it will relate to readers right now. I think it's just a case of actually reading it to each other. That could be quite a nice exercise to do that. But yeah, I think it will get a kind of cult following, I imagine.
Yes. Had you come across her? Be honest, before you read this book.
I just hadn't. And I felt like I read so much fiction over 3 years of doing the Orange Prize, Man Booker, and then independent foreign fiction, and yet there are still whole swathes of writing that you just miss. You just miss because whatever year you do it, they don't have a book out, and so no, I just hadn't. She's a complete discovery for me.
And given what you were both saying earlier about perhaps the predominance this year of North American writers and books set there, she has made history. She's the first Northern Irish writer to win the prize in its 50-year history. So I guess you both think that's probably a good thing for the prize, anyway.
Yeah, I think it shows that you never know what's going to be. There's no sort of tropes in fiction. You can't predict what's going to happen with any wave of what's going to be taught or what's not, just as you can't with what will be published. And I think that's going to be a promising for the future years, I think.
Simon, this prize is clearly extremely important if you've won it, and it's presumably very important for publishers and also for booksellers. How much, though, do you think it really informs readers and what they go out and buy?
I know lots of people who buy the Man Booker winner for everyone for Christmas. So I think this could be one of those books, but I also think it's definitely got that history and it's got that behind it, and I think it does shine a light on what is, I suppose, literary fiction of the time.
Yeah, and you think she's a voice that we'll hear more of? I mean, it seems a bit invidious for me to say. She's 56. She didn't start writing until her 30s, and she still takes quite a long time over each book.
Oh, that's all right. I mean, Donna Tartt takes 10 years every time, and everybody celebrates and is delighted whenever she produces a book. And Aristotle was, in his late 40s before he got to work. So, I don't think we should... It's absolutely right to celebrate the brilliance of somebody young pushing through like Daisy Johnson has, but people don't stop being interesting when they're not in their 20s.
No, so and I was not suggesting that for 1 minute. But I mean, it's interesting that she wasn't writing, rapidly, as a young person, that she's come to writing quite late.
Yeah, and I think, perhaps it's not something that makes me feel very happy about the writing industry, that now it's harder to make a living. I suspect more people will have to have a job for a while first.
We must leave it there. Natalie Haynes, Simon Savage, thank you both very much. And that's it. The Man Booker Prize for 2018 has been won by Anna Burns for Milkman. Thank you for joining us, and bye-bye.